The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
You're now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am, of course, your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Tuesday, February 7th, 2017. Thanks so much for joining us. And thank you for joining us a little bit earlier tonight than normal. We are trying to, partly trying to accommodate this debate between Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders. I'm interested in watching it somewhat. I don't really think much is going to come of it, but I want to at least be able to watch it. And I'm getting old. I can't start the show at 10:30. I think the debate is over at 10:30. It's you understand. So we're an hour earlier tonight. So thank you so much. The phone lines, as always, will be open 857-600-0518. And despite starting an hour early, we have a lot of news. A lot of news to cover. I want to start with. Excuse me. I want to start with Sean Duffy, congressman, former Real World, I think is the name of the show. When I was younger, The Real World on MTV, a reality TV show, and participant. I was going to say host, but he's not a host. But anyway, he was on CNN today, and he really showed the depth of America's fixation with Islamic terrorism to the complete dismissal of white terrorism in the United States, which is actually a very real thing. So this is a long clip. I'm going to try to play it in segments because it is that it's that ridiculous. So let's take a look at it and listen to Sean Duffy on CNN this morning. Here we go.
I'm shocked.
Congressman, why isn't the president talking about the white terrorist who mowed down 6 Muslims who were praying at their mosque?
Yeah, I don't know. But I would just tell you, there is a difference. Again, death and murder on both sides is wrong. But if you want to take the dozens of scenarios where ISIS-inspired attacks have taken innocents, and you give me one example of what's happening, I think that was in Canada.
Yeah.
I'm going to condemn them all. But again, you don't have a group like ISIS or Al-Qaeda
Really?
that's inspiring people around the world to take up arms and kill innocents. That was a one-off. That was a one-off, Allison.
Hold on
and you
a
have
second.
a movement on the other
Hold
side.
on a second, Congressman.
Bring it on, Allison.
You don't think there are white extremists? You don't remember Oklahoma City? You don't think that this guy who was involved in the mosque shooting said that he was inspired by things that he read online?
So you give me 2 examples, right? And in recent time, we're going to talk about the one example. And there is radicals all over the world and here in America now that'll take up arms and do bad things. But if you want to compare this one person in the last 10 years that you can give me an example of, Oklahoma.
Okay, I have to stop there. I have to stop there because I can only let lies linger only so long before I snap. So one, I want to give props to the host. She did the best she could, and she actually did a great job, even just with 1 or 2 examples. And as we play the rest of the clip, you'll see that she didn't really have a lot of examples to give of white terrorism in the United States. Now, this conversation is stemming from Donald Trump's changing of the focus of a specific task force here in America from focusing on terrorism in general to focusing on Islamic terrorism in specific, which completely erases the reality of white terrorism in the United States of America, which white terrorism is a thing in America. And you could see this Republican representative can't, he's digging himself into a hole. First of all, he said his first gut reaction was, quote, "There is a difference," close quote. What's the difference? Please tell me. What's the difference? An extreme interpretation of the religion Islam, you have it. In Christianity, you most certainly have it. So what's the difference? The number of people who have been killed. I mean, we can go down the list of them. We actually will go down the list of just since 2000, some of the murders, the mass murders committed by white Christian terrorists in the United States, particularly right-wing extremists in the United States. So what's the difference? 6 people killed in Quebec, 9 people killed in Charleston, South Carolina, all done. He's trying to parse a difference that does not exist. Extremism and terrorism. The only difference is that in America, the real threat, the actual threat recorded incidents, a majority have been, if you take 9/11 out of the equation, which a lot of people say, oh, well, you can't do that. But let's take 9/11 out of the equation. There have been more people killed by white extremist terrorists in the United States. Now, of course, you're going to throw back in 9/11, then you're going to try to wash, but if you take a look at the number of incidents, you're going to see that the ongoing persistent threat in the United States is white right-wing extremists. And this guy's response is telling of Republican ideology in general and white supremacy in general, where it will never equate their own violence to the violence that they want to draw the attention to, which is exactly what Donald Trump has done. Donald Trump is saying and signaling to the world that we're not going to focus on white terrorism, or white extremist terrorism, and we're going to focus only on Islamic terrorism. That's because when their very definition in their mind, when they say terrorists, they do not see white. They do not see whiteness. They see brown. They want to implicate brown people versus white people. But in America, now, if you talk about overseas, yes, the reality is different. But in the United States, the reality is white terrorism is a more persistent threat to the average American than any refugee would ever be. All right, let's listen a little bit more to this drivel and see if we can. We're going to let him make his case, and then we'll make our case. All right, let's listen in.
Oklahoma was, 20 years ago, the Oklahoma City bombing. That's different than this whole movement that's taken place through ISIS that's inspired attacks. I mean, are you going to compare the one attack up in Canada to all the death and destruction in Europe from refugees, or the attacks in the United States of America?
How about the Charleston church shooting?
He was
an extremist. He was a white extremist.
Yeah, he was. Okay.
How about that? That doesn't matter?
No, it does matter. It does matter. Look at the good things that came from it. And Nikki Haley took down the Confederate flag. That was great. But you want to say, I can give you a couple examples. There's no constant thread that goes through these attacks. And you have radical Islamic terrorists and ISIS that are driving the attacks. And if you want to compare those two, maybe you can throw another one. I mean, look at Gabby Giffords.
Okay, before he goes to Gabby Giffords, because he's going to throw in some lies in there about the shooter, Jared Lee Loughner. Before he goes there, he's trying to make a distinction that does not exist. He's trying to say that there exists no ideology, a consistent interconnecting ideology that inspires these white extremist terrorists versus Islamic terrorists. And he's trying to say that Islam itself is the connecting thread with these terrorists, which, if that was the case, well, anyway, I'm not even going to go into that argument because, of course, 1.5 billion people in the world are Muslim, right? All right. And then the smallest fraction of them are actually the extremist terrorists. Well, there is a fraction of Christianity that engage in right-wing Christian terrorism. But he's trying to draw a distinction and say that there's no common thread that connects it. So he's trying to make it seem as though anytime there's a white terrorist incident, it's an isolated incident. Therefore, there's nothing that we can do about it. And we shouldn't focus on it because there's no connecting thread. But there is, right? There's an entire ideology for which Donald Trump actually benefits, right? From which he benefits. There's an entire ideology that presses or pushes this narrative that there's white genocide occurring, that there needs to be a separation of the races, that whites are superior to brown people and to black people, that whites are the pure race, and that we have to, there's this entire thread that connects all of the white terrorists that we run into. Now, are there there's always random shooters. Yes, we're not going to say that every single incident of white terrorism has been connected to white Christian terrorism and right-wing extremism, but there is a consistent thread. just as much as there's a consistent thread in Islamic terrorism. But they would never concede that point because they wanted to be an attack. They wanted to be a referendum against Islam, not so much the terrorism, because if it was about terrorism, they would focus on terrorism in general. All right, so now he's getting ready to go into this part, and it's a long clip, but we got to watch it because, you know, this guy, Sean, like I said, he was on Real World, and I'm not going to say because he was on Real World, he's an idiot. I'm going to say because of what he said today on CNN, he's an idiot. But he's not smart enough, clearly not smart enough to avoid these pitfalls and to be, you know, it could be one of two things, right? He's just not smart enough to avoid the pitfalls, or he thinks that this is a high time for him to be able to say this kind of thing because this is the type of thing that Donald Trump would say and get away with it. But unfortunately for Sean, he's no Donald Trump. All right, so let's listen to his lies, quite frankly, on the shooter of former Representative Gabby Giffords. All right, listen in.
Look at Gabby Giffords, the Marxist who took her life, a leftist guy, and now you see violence and terror in the streets all across America, burning and beating people with Donald Trump hats.
All right, so let's just talk about that. This is a consistent lie from conservatives. Jared Lee Loughner, the shooter of Gabby Giffords, was not a leftist. He identified, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, he identified with right-wing extremists. However, they even admitted that he had a very disjointed ideology, and he intersected with right-wing extremism. However, they could not clearly identify him as a leftist or a extreme right, a part of the extreme right. To that end, this is an attempt to revise and to absolve right-wing politics of their extremism. This is all it is. And this is a standard play. This is my enemy is the only one that's guilty of anything, and we are perfect. Our politics are basically as pure as Jesus in the Immaculate Conception, right? Born pure. And this is a consistent theme with Republicans, but never so transparent have you seen this thinly veiled Islamophobic rhetoric be taken apart by a journalist who really didn't even have as many details as she needed, but she had enough to embarrass this guy. All right, let's listen in to the rest of this drivel.
The violence you have to look at, you're trying to use some examples of the right. So where do we go? The left, wait, hold on a second. The left has to say violence is wrong, whether we look, and if love and peace from, as you brought up in San Bernardino, why don't we look at Berkeley, where people get beat, thank you. People that get beat up for wearing a Donald Trump hat, Make America Great Again hat again, or they get kicked, and stores get vandalized, and they burn and they beat. Where does the left and CNN and MSNBC stand up and go, you know what, this is wrong. If we're going to have peace in our hearts,
and
we're going to
inspire
the
Muslims
left.
are attacked as well, and when swastikas are
I don't know what a swastika is, but
we've been talking about
Allison,
all of it.
come on.
Why are you using isolated? Why do you think that when it's a white terrorist, it's an isolated incident?
So what I'm saying is, you have a cell, a heart, a beat of ISIS that's inspiring people around the world. And do you deny that? That's going to Europe and come to America,
right?
Whether it's lone wolves. And so what's the heartbeat of the attack that you referenced in the mosque, or what happened in Charleston?
Extremism,
is there a common theme that
hatred,
runs?
White supremacy.
Can we vet that? How should we vet that to keep ourselves safe? I'll join you in that effort. What do we do?
Do you not think it was white supremacy? This is what the shooters said it was.
Okay, I gotta pause there. This is what the shooter said it was. Like, this is low hanging fruit, and it shows you the bereftness of this argument, right? But there is a common thread. Common thread is white supremacy, hatred of minorities, Islamophobia, just hatred of just blackness. They hate blackness. You know, they clearly said with their own mouths, Dylan Roof in particular, why he was doing this. He wanted to start a race war, but there's a complete silence, a void of any conversation about right-wing extremism in the United States, even to the point now where Donald Trump is not going to focus on white terrorism. He's only going to focus on Islamic terrorism because, as we all know, there's no white terrorism in the United States, despite it being the #1 threat compared to refugees. All right, there's a little bit more, and again, bear with me because I just want you to experience the utter idiocy of whatever it is, Sean Duffy. Sounds as ridiculous as his name. Here we go.
Yeah, it's horrible. So what should we do? I mean, I'll join you. What do we do on the white supremacy front to make sure we don't have?
Well, what you can do is you can ban white supremacists. You know, let's focus at a minimum, right? At a minimum, what you can do is talk to your president and put the focus of this committee, not independent, but of this committee, put the focus back on terrorism in general instead of just Islamic terrorism. That's step number one.
Another attack like Charleston. I am with you on that, Allison.
Speak
But
out about
I
it,
don't know.
crack down on it, talk about
Sure.
it as extreme violence
So
as much as we talk about
So
all
why
of
don't we
the
crack
other
down? Yes.
terrorism
So-
that you
so
call
let's
radical Islamic terrorism.
So let's crack down on ISIS. Let's crack down on the 7 terror countries that are riddled with terrorists, and give Donald Trump 90 days to 120 days. Give him a pause to make sure he can keep us safe. Because you know what? If we could have vetted that guy.
All right, that's enough. That's enough. If you could have vetted, you wouldn't have, clearly. So, all right. Here's the thing. You know, I think the journal, and I can't remember her name, but she just simply brought up enough examples to completely blow his argument out of the water, but she did not have a definitive list of the white extremist terrorism, particularly right-wing terrorism that exists in the United States. And I just want to highlight, there was a great article by Slate.com, Ben Mathis Lilly. He compiled a list of terrorism in the United States, of white terrorism in the United States, I think back to 94. But I just want to start in 2000 because there's so many examples just since 2000 to completely undermine everything that this congressman said, and not just this idiotic congressman, but also your president, the president of the United States, who doesn't feel like it's necessary to focus on white terrorism. It really is just antithetical. It's completely counter, rather, to the evidence. So April 28th, 2000, an unemployed immigration attorney named Richard Bonhammer, who believed non-white immigration should be banned, shoots and kills 5 people in the Pittsburgh area. And again, this is straight from Slate.com. Ben Mathis Lilly. December 8th, 2003, Steve Bixby kills 2 police officers. May 24th, 2004, Wade and Christopher Lay, they shoot and kill a bank security guard in Tulsa, Oklahoma. January 21st, 2009, neo-Nazi Keith Luke rapes and kills an immigrant from Cape Verde in Brockton, Massachusetts. April 4th, 2009, Richard Popolowski, a frequent poster on the white supremacist site Stormfront. He shoots and kills 3 Pittsburgh police officers. And if you want to ask about the consistent theme, go to Stormfront. Just take a day and go to Stormfront, and you will see the ideology that connects all of this extreme right-wing terrorism. May 30th, 2009, Shauna Ford, Albert Gaxilio, and Jason Bush kill a Latino man and his 9-year-old daughter in Arizona. May 31st, 2009, Scott Reuter kills Dr. George Tiller. This is one of the most famous cases that we know of, who was an abortion provider in Wichita, Kansas. And he killed him because of extremist right-wing ideology. May 20th, 2010, father and son pair named Jerry and Joseph Kane, who conducted seminars about how sovereign citizens movement, an extremist movement. He conducted seminars about how they can evade debt. He killed 2 West Memphis, Arkansas police officers. September 26th, 2011, white supremacist David Pedersen and Holly Ann Grigsby. They kill Grigsby's father and stepmother in Washington, in the state of Washington. August 5th, 2012, there's another, 6 people were killed by Michael Page, August 16th, 2012, the sovereign citizen movement member Brian Smith and Kyle Jukel, they killed 2 Louisiana sheriff deputies. September 4th, 2012, April 3rd, 2014, June 8th, 2014, September 12th, 2014, July 24th, 2015, all examples of white supremacist extreme right-wing terrorism in the United States. Now, give me a list of refugees who have committed this amount of terrorism inside of the United States. Give me a list. You can't. All right, enough of that. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, Ben, it's me, Jared, again. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Jared. What's on your mind?
I know that you probably don't want to hear from me again this week, but I have to call out one of your callers yesterday because your last caller you had on, she was talking about quote unquote illegal immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
And she, it came off pretty racist, honestly. She sounded very resentful towards them, and I really was disturbed by that call. And I know when you heard that call, you were like, "Oh shoot, I don't want to take this." Just totally dropped that. I think she was totally off base when she said that, and I don't think the first time she said something pretty offensive on your show. And I know I just wanted to call that out, that we should not be attacking each other in this, very racist atmosphere, because that's what the capitalist class tend to do, is that they try to pit each other, like immigrants against the workers, and, just claim that we're all, blacks and Latinos fighting each other.
Mm-hmm.
And, we need to realize that you should not be blaming the people who are being exploited. And these elite, undocumented immigrants, no person is illegal. There's no illegal lines on a map.
Yeah.
That they're being just as exploited as we are.
Yep. I got to cut it there only because of time, Jared. It's always a pleasure. Thanks for the call, and I'll let you and the caller, I'm sure you guys can find each other in cyberspace on Twitter, and I'll let you guys hash that out. 857-600-0518. All right, I'm going to keep it trucking. In other news, so not only are we dealing with an administration who denies the existence of white terrorism, we're also dealing with an administration who is feeding directly into the hands of terrorism in general. Donald Trump. Now, actually, I want to start back during the primaries. Early on in the election last year, Hillary Clinton said something that she took a lot of heat for. She said that, she claimed, and with no evidence, but she claimed that ISIS is using Donald Trump as a recruitment tool. And she got a lot of flack for it. And I don't think she had evidence at the time, but we have evidence of it now. Right. We have evidence now because the number one way you foster terrorism and radicalization is by fueling the ideology, by being the exact thing they accuse you of. And today, the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, he essentially issued a thank you to Donald Trump for, quote, revealing the true nature of America. This took place today, and it's weird in the sense because there's really no way that Iran can take some superior moral stand against the United States in terms of bigotry or the treatment of human rights violations, right? But this does not preclude Khamenei, rather, from being correct on his assessment of Donald Trump. And again, this goes right back to the reality that the more we fuel it with our own bigotry and with our foreign policy, the reality of it is we are doing the radicalization and we are fueling the very blowback that we have to deal with. So the supreme leader of the Ayatollah Khamenei today said that Donald Trump, thanks to the White House's new fool. I thought that was, anyway, it's funny to me, but it's definitely true. So he says that Donald Trump has shown America's real face. He said no enemy can paralyze Iran. He told an audience, and he also said that, quoting, that he seized on that. He said, quote, he says we should be grateful to Obama. We should be thankful because he brought war and bloodshed to Syria. And he's speaking of the tweet that Donald Trump sent out, the inflammatory tweet saying that they should be grateful for Obama because Obama was weak and Obama was kind to them, and that they should say thank you and that he's not going to be weak. Again, this plays directly into the idea that showing bravado and showing quote unquote hubris, while you think it represents strength, it actually undermines your position. So this is what he said. He said, quote, we actually thank this new president. We thank him because he made it easier for us to reveal the real face of the United States. What we have been saying for over 30 years about political, economic, moral, and social corruption within the United States ruling establishment, he came out and exposed during the election campaigns and after the election. Now, with everything he is doing, handcuffing a child as young as 5 at an airport, he is showing the reality of American human rights. It's hard. I don't believe the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So this is not a favorable look towards Khamenei. But, just like Donald Trump has not been wrong 100% of the time, he's been wrong 99% of the time. Broken clock is right twice a day. And Khamenei is not wrong here. And it's a shame that Donald Trump has put us in a position that Iran can actually have some moral high ground against the United States. But besides the moral high ground on this particular conversation is the truth of the matter. Donald Trump is revealing what America has always been. There's a piece by my colleague Wendy Muse over at progressivearmy.com, which asserts the same sentiment, which is this is not a coup. This is not a takeover of the United States government. This is just a revealing of the United States government. This is the unplugged version, if I can paraphrase. This is the America unplugged, uncensored, uncut. This is what Donald Trump represents. And don't get me wrong, I firmly believe that Donald Trump represents an escalation of the status quo, a furtherance of he represents what my other colleague Brandon always talks about, the excesses of our system. And the problem of our system is not just the excesses of the system, but the system itself. But to be sure, Donald Trump represents a perversion, an escalation of the excesses. And this is what the world is seeing. Now, are we going to say, oh, let's play nice so that Iran can look at us favorably? No, what we're saying is that loud talk is not a sign of strength. Loud talk and a forceful foreign policy and the propensity to go to war does not represent something that strengthens the United States. It always undermines the United States because it fuels our enemies. It recruits better than any propaganda film that ISIS could put together. Donald Trump's language, Donald Trump's behavior, Donald Trump's unplugged reveal of the United States, uncensored reveal of the United States, is the greatest recruitment tool of ISIS and terrorism globally. And what can we say except the fact that we have hired a president who is openly as bigot as America has been in past times? Iran's foreign minister, Javad Zarif, said in an interview in a local newspaper that he expected, quote, difficult times ahead for Iran, now that Mr. Trump was in charge. The president, Hassan Rouhani, he defended the nuclear agreement. These are all things that are surrounding the same story. According to New York Times, Rouhani defended the nuclear agreement between the United States and Iran. Iran is included, of course, in the 7 nations that have a blanket ban And to be sure, the administration, this is not just a Donald Trump issue, right? Donald Trump is the face. Donald Trump is the arrogance. This is the ease, the low hanging fruit is what Donald Trump is for the international community. But his administration, take Michael Flynn. Last week, he warned Tehran that they are on notice. And this is not just him speaking on behalf of President Trump. This is from the depths of his ideology, which has been demonstrated in years past. His laser-like focus on Iran and the desire to have a conflict with Iran. So this again, now it's a terrible indictment on the United States for Iran to actually. For the supreme leader, to actually be right about what our president represents on the world stage. And he represents the perfect propagandization tool. That's close enough. Tool for terrorism. All right, let's take this next caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, Ben, this is Brianna.
Hey, Brianna, how's it going? What's on your mind?
Pretty good. Yeah, it sounds like, I don't know how long, but I want to go on direction. Everyone's predicting that's most likely a scenario that's not going to happen. And, I guess my main question in all this is not having to do with, with Iran. And it's like, how do we get Steve Bannon out of power? Because that, to me, seems like he is the most dangerous guy right now in Washington, D.C., because he seems to have Donald Trump wrapped all over his finger.
Yeah.
And he's also one of the guys that said that he would love to go have a religious war against Islam, Christianity versus Islam and stuff. So how do we get him out of power? Or there's nothing we really can do. And also back to, the whole white supremacists and terrorists and all that. If they want to focus on a Muslim country that's causing majority of the terrorists, why don't they focus on Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, great question.
Because isn't Saudi Arabia producing these terrorist attacks? And aren't they? Because if we go back to 9/11, majority of those people who attacked the Twin Towers were from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
So it was Osama bin Laden.
Yeah. Thanks for the call. Thanks for the question, Brianna. So let's tackle the first question about how do we get rid of Steve Bannon. Well, there's two, a lot of people saying impeach Trump. Again, unless you have a plan to impeach all the above, that's really not going to stop this agenda. But then I like the way you drill down and you say, well, what about Steve Bannon? How do we get it? Because if we get rid of Donald Trump, chances are you get rid of Steve Bannon. But the best scenario would be to keep Donald Trump and get rid of Steve Bannon, because Donald Trump himself could be a buffer to Mike Pence, or at least Donald Trump's children, right? To the only redeeming value that I have seen from the Trump children spawn is the fact that they are willing to fight for LGBTQ rights. Now that leaves a lot of communities vulnerable to Donald Trump, right? And this is in no way of making them seem like they're noble or they as though we should not protest the hell out of them, right? But that's the only redeeming value that I've seen so far in the entire spawn of Donald Trump. And to that end, I think the best scenario would be to get rid of Steve Bannon and keep Trump in there, because he and his children would be at least at a minimum a buffer against Mike Pence's war on the LGBTQ community, and possibly this is a stretch. I'm stretching here, but possibly a buffer against the war on women. It hasn't panned out to be that yet, right? Everything that they're doing so far is adding up to be an all-out war on women. But I'm wishful thinking that maybe Ivanka would step in on some of the women rights issues. I could be completely wrong, and the audience could be laughing at me right now. But, I mean, I can wish, right? We can hope. Otherwise, Mike Pence represents a full onslaught across the board on every issue that we fight for. And how do you get rid of Steve Bannon and keep Trump? Is that you let Trump know that the rest of America thinks that Steve Bannon is in charge. Donald Trump's vanity cannot tolerate Steve Bannon being the star of the show. And so if we focus on Steve Bannon and make it to be what it really is, he's the puppet master and Donald Trump is the puppet. Well, Steve Bannon won't last long, because what's more important to Donald Trump than any policy is his ego, and he can't handle his ego being bruised. Now, to answer your second question about Saudi Arabia, I heard one argument that is worth discussing with regard to why perhaps we're not focusing on the nations from which the terrorists of 9/11 actually attacked us. Now, I don't agree with it, but I think it was a fairly decent argument. And this was from, I forgot the guy's name. I can't think of his name, but he's a representative for Trump speaking from the White House on CNN today. And he spoke about how the location of terrorism has not been static, or the source of terrorism hasn't been static since 2001. And this is true, right? ISIS did not start in Saudi Arabia. But again, paying no attention to Saudi Arabia and the other nations that we are allies with, who actually help fund and the terrorists actually came from, is completely erroneous, or completely shows that this is not about rooting out terrorism, but this is about politicizing terrorism to their own benefit. And this is why they would not focus on Saudi Arabia, because attacking Saudi Arabia, politically speaking, completely undermines the U.S. current foreign policy in the region. Not to suggest that it is a foreign policy that we should continue, right? We really should reconsider who we have as an ally in the region. But in terms of current politics, we would not dare put Saudi Arabia on a list of state sponsors of terrorism, even though they deserve to be on that list more so than probably any other nation. We wouldn't dare do that because it undermines our current foreign policy. All right, let's keep trucking and cover some other news. So there's a story that I wanted to discuss on yesterday, but ran out of time. Which is it's a little out of the presidential politics, but I think it's a great story. Coming out of Houston, a flight attendant saves a teen from sex slavery. This is a phenomenal story. She said the flight attendant essentially said that she just simply paid attention to the young woman and how she looked, and she described her as looking as though she has had the worst experiences in her life. And I'm pulling up an image of the flight attendant now on your screen. She said that that something in the back of my mind said something is not right here. And this is Sheila Frederick, who was on a flight. So she noticed that the young woman had her entire presentation, her dress, her upkeeping, her hair, it signaled that there was a problem, compared to the man that she was sitting next to, who was well groomed, who looked as though he was wealthy, and the juxtaposition of the young lady next to the wealthy man set off alarms. And what she did was, which I think was a fascinating story, is that she went inside of the restroom and left a note for the young girl in the restroom, asking her if she needed help. And the young girl, once she went into the restroom, she wrote on the note, "Yes, I need help." Now, this was in light of, this was in context of a movement in general to get the airlines to help root out the sex slave trade that actually hits America far more frequently than any of us probably would expect. And so what has happened, or at least in this case and in other cases, the flight attendant let the pilot know that there was a problem here, that this person was being trafficked, and they let the police on the ground know. And as soon as they landed, the police were there to arrest the man and help set the young woman free. So this is a great story that really normally would go on the radar in the midst of all of the insanity that's happening politically. But it just shows you that even in the midst of craziness, that there's some good can come out of it. And really the need for us to bring light to the fact that this is happening, not in a foreign country, not overseas. I think a lot of times we look overseas and say all of the bad things happen there. Because we have this American-centric view of most anything, right? We think it's the other. It's happening over there, away from us. It's like the otherification of problems, of human problems. But in reality, it comes through the United States of America all of the time, every single issue. But this is one that actually had a relative, actually, no, not a relatively happy ending, but a happy ending. In other news, so let's the biggest story, honestly, that's happening today is the reality of the confirmation of the most unqualified Secretary of Education that I think we have ever had in the United States, and that's the confirmation of Betsy DeVos, which occurred today. And it was a 51-50 vote, a split that Vice President Mike Pence had to come to the Senate and preside as the president of the Senate and cast his vote. There were 2 Republicans who voted against DeVos. That was Senators Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. Both of them said that they had been influenced not just by the complete incompetence of Betsy DeVos, but by their constituents and the pressure that they received from their constituents. Now, even though we did not have a victory here, it does show you the political power of pressure and the ability to change the position of congressmen and congresswomen by virtue of picking up the phone and calling your senators and calling your congressmen. No Democrats voted for Betsy DeVos, and because in many ways this was the only litmus test. Mind you, Cory Booker has served previously on a board with Betsy DeVos, and in many ways, some Democrats, particularly Cory Booker, represent an affront to public schools by virtue of their support, their unfeigned and unlimited support for charter schools and the voucher program and the ability to defund public schools by sending those funds to public charter schools. But they want to escalate this even more. When I say they, Republicans and particularly Betsy DeVos wants to escalate this even more. DeVos is a heavy supporter of the use of charter school funds and vouchers. DeVos, neither DeVos nor any of her children have ever attended a public school. She's never worked in a public school. She's never taken out a federal loan because of how wealthy her family was at the time and currently is. She is the president of the president rather of the American Federation of Teachers said, quote, "It's telling that even when Trump had full control over the legislative and executive branches, he could only get DeVos confirmed by an unprecedented tie-breaking vote by his vice president." And, you know, it is telling, but the reality of it is she's in there. The president of the American Federation of Teachers went on to say that's because DeVos shows an antipathy for public schools, a full-throated embrace of private for-profit alternatives, and a lack of basic understanding of what children need to succeed in school. And this is the biggest threat, is the fact that she is looking to, in a sense, privatize public education and to drain as much money as she can. I mean, even actually to segue, there's a representative who's actually now campaigning to do away with the entire Department of Education. So it's not just the privatization of education, but it's also this desire to leave students at the complete mercy of states without any federal oversight. And this is an example of what Republicans claim they want to support states' rights, but they only support states' rights to the extent that it supports their ideology. And I think this is clear as day with regard to everything that we're seeing from the Trump administration. And so here they're claiming states' rights in this attempt to not only and actually let me sidestep here. If you're going to destroy the Department of Education, if you're going to try to find a way of undermining its legitimacy and its usefulness, someone as incompetent and malicious towards public education like Betsy DeVos is the perfect person to put in charge of it. And this is where I think they're ultimately trying to go. They're trying to undermine the legitimacy and the usefulness. And so they put someone there who is going to be perfect for gutting the current infrastructure, gutting the current successful programs, and completely putting it in a position to where it is irrelevant to public life. And I'm gonna be honest with you, we're at the point where we are going to have to rebuild a lot of America as soon as we get rid of Donald Trump and get rid of this conservative movement, right? And I have to always draw that distinction. It's not just Trump. It's this entire conservative movement, which intersects, yes, it intersects with some neoliberal Democrats, particularly on this education issue. But we're getting to a place where they are actively trying to destroy key components of the federal government, which provide protections for the average citizen and would leave us completely exposed to the desires of private organizations who are driven by profit only, even at the expense of the individual. And I think that's clear as day. So we're going to have to rebuild. I mean, their next target is the EPA. They're literally trying to find a way to destroy and not only defund, but completely dissolve the Environmental Protection Agency. So if you're curious as to how and why Republicans would overwhelmingly confirm someone so incompetent, someone so hostile to the public education, you have to consider the amount of money that she as an individual and her family has donated to Republican senators. If you could go down the line, Marco Rubio, $98,300 from the DeVos family. Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana, $70,000. Thomas Tillis of North Carolina, $70,000. Pat Toomey, $60,000. Rob Portman, $51,000. John McCain, $50,000. I mean, every person who voted for her has received tens of thousands of dollars, almost $100,000 from Marco Rubio of Florida, from the DeVos family. So what do you expect? She is the best Republican Secretary of Education that money can buy. And again, we're going to have to fight to rebuild America, man. That's where we are. We're at the point where Republicans are going to be able to do as much as they want to do, as much damage as they possibly can get done, and to bring some attention to a strategy. The strategy has to be to take the House at a minimum, take the House or the Senate, preferably both, in 2018. But to give you an idea, 2018 was already slated to be in favor, to create a supermajority, rather, for Republicans because of the number of Democrats that are up in 2018 and the number of Democrats who are up in purple states in 2018. So it doesn't look like a good spot for Democrats to be a buffer. And to be sure, right, in this progressive conversation that we have, an ongoing conversation of purging neoliberals from the Democratic Party, we've got to stop Trump's agenda. We have to. We have to. And the only way that we can do it, we're not going to be able to do it by 2018 with any third party candidates. Maybe one or two independents that are currently in office, but we're not going to be able to get the numbers that we need without the Democratic Party. And I'm sorry, we absolutely 100% have to beat back Donald Trump. We got to hold the line in 2018. Can you imagine 4 years of this type of assault on a progressivism in America? This all-out war that they're having on progressivism, on progress in general, and the desire to take us back. We have to hold the line. We have to hold the line in 2018. And it is an uphill battle, which means that if anything we should focus on, if anything we should put our energy on, it should be taking back state legislatures across the country and taking back one of the houses on the federal level, because that is our only hope. And that's going to require a significant amount of organizing. That's going to require a significant amount of funding. That's going to require a significant amount of allying with people who on other issues are our political rivals. Let's be clear. There's some issues that divide us between neoliberals and progressives that make them our political rival. But right about now, the greatest threat is the onslaught of what Donald Trump is doing. And again, I have to correct myself. I keep saying Donald Trump, but this is conservatism. This is republicanism. This is what they want. This is their wet dreams. Paul Ryan doesn't care about how imbecilic Donald Trump is, because Donald Trump has presented him an opportunity to gut every safety net, every public program, and to privatize as much as they possibly can, as quickly as they can, to defund Planned Parenthood, to destroy the EPA, to destroy the Department of Education, to destroy anything that would protect the average citizen from the profit motives of grifters across the United States of America. Paul Ryan is willing to tolerate Donald Trump so long as he can get his agenda across. And we 100% have to find a way to hold the line in 2018, which means every single one of us have work to do. We have work to do. If you feel if we can find candidates who are the ideal progressive that can win in their general election and actually, let me pause. Let me take a step back, sidestep. There are some Democrats like Joe Manchin of West Virginia who is completely hostile to even holding the line, hostile to the resistance. Now, I am not saying that we should just let any Democrat in, because some of these Democrats are 100% okay with Donald Trump. However, we cannot be so distracted by the differences that we have between neoliberals and progressives at this point, when we are underneath a full onslaught assault from conservatism. Everything that you hate about neoliberalism, Donald Trump and his conservative movement and the Republican Party, they are that on steroids. And I've been saying it since the primaries. They are everything that we hate on steroids, with the added bonus of white supremacy and white nationalism, not just being there because it has always been there, but having a platform and a voice in the White House. We got to stop them. We got to stop them, and every one of us has a role to play in that. All right, let's talk about one last thing before we let you guys go and watch Ted Cruz try to debate Bernie Sanders. There's an interesting story out of San Francisco, which sort of highlights the tension between a good idea and the reality of capitalism. San Francisco is announcing that it's giving free community college to all of its residents. This is according to USA Today. In San Francisco, of course, the mayor announced that the city would make college education free to all of the residents through the City College of San Francisco. And according to US Today, the agreement is made possible through a tax on properties sold for at least $5 million. And there's a quote from Mayor Ed Lee. He said, quote, "To California residents who are living in San Francisco, your community college is now free." Okay. This is great. This is great. And this is the direction that America in general should move. particularly with bachelor's degree. Of course, the associate's degree that you would get from a community college, yes, and the bachelor's degree level, because it's essentially equivalent to what a high school diploma would have done for you in the 50s. Not, it was the baseline. You needed it at a minimum. You needed a high school diploma. So this is great. This is not to knock them, but the reality of it is, who can afford to live in San Francisco? They can. It is. I mean, unless there's rent controlled housing, which I'm sure there's some to be found, but some of the wealthiest people, and actually let me qualify that better, people in the professional class, lawyers and doctors and engineers, they find it difficult to live in San Francisco. And I doubt very serious that their children are going to go to community college. It might be, but this is the reality of it is that it's just the rent is too damn high in San Francisco for this to really. I would be surprised if this if this is going to increase a significant amount of people. So the San Francisco Examiner reported that the college itself lost a third of students during an accreditation crisis, and since they've had their accreditation renewed, there's a potential of an increase of 20% enrollment, a 20% enrollment increase, according to that newspaper. I'm still curious as to what percentage of the city that actually represents, right? An increase for the school doesn't necessarily represent a statistically significant increase for the overall city, because in San Francisco, the rent is too damn high. I just can't imagine how many people could afford to live in San Francisco that actually needed to send their kids to community college because of financial constraints. But it is a start. It's not nothing. I don't want to just be a contrarian just to be a contrarian. This is the direction that all of America should go. All right, we're going to take this last caller. Caller, you're live on the air from Mississippi. What is your name, comment, and our question?
Yes, this is Robin from Houston. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. From Houston. Yeah, the 601 area code. What's on your mind?
Hey, I just wanted to say, going back to the Betsy DeVos confirmation, I'm a teacher, and I was watching it during lunch. The confirmation was during lunch, and I knew it was going to go through, but there was still that little bit of hope holding out, and going to the Republicans who all they did was side with the party lines. I don't want to hear anything from them ever again, especially John McCain, all these people who are saying that they listen to all of their constituents.
Right.
There is not one constituent who called them and said, hey, we want this lady. No one wanted this lady. And I'm really upset with John McCain, because if you go back, remember about 8 years ago, he was all kowtowing about how he would go against the party line if he had to, because he's a maverick. He's a maverick. He is no maverick. He went with the party line because this lady donated to him and everyone else $200 million. So I feel like there should be a campaign, and I know it's years down the line, but a campaign against him, showing how he's a maverick. No, he's not a maverick. Just completely have him saying, I'm a maverick, but just completely show how false that is. And it needs to be that with every single Republican, just get them all out of office as best we can, to show them how much they lie and how much they say we're just going to be doing it for you. But in fact, when it came down to it, all they cared about was staying in power.
Yeah, that's it. That's all it is, and that's all it's ever been. Thanks so much for the call. That's all they have ever done, is do whatever is necessary to hold their grip on power. And they're willing to ignore their constituents. They need these donations from people like Betsy DeVos. They have a debt. This is a direct example of why money needs to get out of politics, because they have a debt to pay to the DeVos family, whatever, DeVos, whatever. How could they vote against her? How could they vote against her when they've all received tens of thousands of dollars from them? Over the family over the years has given over almost 200 million, I think I heard you say. That's insane. They have purchased their way right into the position that profits them. This is not just like an ambassadorship, right? This is placing Betsy DeVos into a role that she would profit from, undermining the interests of public education. She has business interests that would benefit from the privatization of our public system. So, this has been an investment for her and her family over the years. And here we are now at the point where she is now the the Secretary of the Department of Education. Let's see, it would be, possibly 4 years, even if we take back the House and the Senate. Some of the decisions that Donald Trump is making is going to last. The ramification is going to reach so far beyond the next 4 years, which really goes back to what I was saying. We're going to have to rebuild some key agencies, key concepts, just the basics. We're going to have to rebuild America just to undo the damage that Donald Trump is doing within the first few weeks. And always remember that the people who are 100% in lockstep, despite his authoritarian leanings, despite his onslaught on states' rights on particular issues, despite his ruling by edict, all the things that they accuse Barack Obama of doing, they are happy as, I don't know, they're happy as they could possibly be to be able to implement their draconian conservative policies, no matter how much it undermines the Constitution, individual liberty, and states' rights. They don't care. They want their agenda at all costs, which shows you we are at the point where we cannot rationalize with them. We cannot play with them. We cannot reason with them. We have to beat them. And when we beat them, we have to beat them so badly that the Overton window shifts back to the left, where the real debate would exist between progressives and neoliberals. Let that be the Overton window. That should be the range of our discourse in the United States, because this extreme conservatism is so detrimental to the progress of humanity in general and America in specific, that it should not even be up for consideration. And this is another example of them trying to show strength with their ideology, that over time it should represent blowback against their ideology. They're implementing everything they believe in as fast and quickly as they possibly can. And so now we should expose America to how dangerous their ideology really is by talking to our neighbors, talking to your family, going to talk to the people who did not vote. I'm going to say it every night. Go door to door, go to your barbershop, go to your church, go to your beauty salon, go to your friend's house. Talk to the people who did not vote and show them how much of a threat conservatism is to the United States. And let's put them out of power as quickly as we possibly can and beat them in such a spectacular way that they're not even in the conversation anymore. And then we get back to the debate between progressivism and neoliberalism. You guys have a good night. Enjoy the debate with Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders. Stay tuned. After the debate, there will be the late show with Anoa Changa and Brandon Sutton. We'll see you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.